Abnormal art and monstrous creations brought to life. Frankenfest, a new festival showcasing mad, magical, and mystical artwork, exhibits, and attractions, authors, haunt aficionados, and paranormal experts. Frankenfest arrives in Detroit at historic Fort Wayne on September 18th. For more details, visit frankenfest.com.
Hey listeners, please note that this episode does contain multiple depictions of violence that most people will find disturbing. If you would like to avoid this type of content, please skip this entire episode and meet us back here next week. Thanks. Hey guys.
Hey.
Welcome back.
We have returned.
So, what's new with you?
Right now I have a very tenuous grip on my sanity due to a combination of family obligations and self-imposed things that I am regretting trying to do.
I get that.
So, what have you been up to?
Well, we had a few weeks off.
Mm-hmm.
I turned 38.
Yes.
And I went to Toledo last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Hung out with Matt. And then we took a little side trip to the Death Museum that's over in Mount Clemens.
Yep.
And that was a lot of fun. We got to hang out with an actual skull. His name was Lewis.
Yes, I enjoyed the picture of Lewis. That was the highlight of my week.
If I think about it later, I'll try to share those pictures, because why not?
It was cute.
It's not every day that you get to take a selfie with a real skull.
This is true.
Seize those opportunities, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Today we are talking about nightmares with nice smiles.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentledoms, we present necrophiliacs.
Necrophilia. So, I have always had this twisted interest in necrophilia.
Of course.
And I actually talk about it quite frequently. And recently, Matt and I had this conversation about necrophilia where I kind of feel like if you're not killing anybody to participate, it's basically like the victimless crime.
I remember this conversation.
And I feel like, I mean, it's not for me, but,
no.
But I'm not going to shame anyone that wants to bang dead people.
Oh my God.
Because, like, who are they hurting?
Okay.
Like, if you're not digging them up and committing crimes to do it, like, who are you hurting? I mean, it's a little bizarre.
Yeah.
But
in this instance, I will yuck their yum. I usually won't, but in this particular instance, I will.
So, I mean, it's not for me, but, if you like banging dead people, more power to you guys. Just
do it ethically.
Yes,
ethically
please.
sourced.
Ethically
corpses.
source your partners.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
Their deaths should be more organic and not like you causing them. So,
Got it.
That is my TED Talk. Thank you. Do you want some dad jokes?
Of course I do.
So, what is the difference between having a granny fetish and necrophilia?
What?
A few weeks.
Oh, Casey. Oh, that's gross.
It is gross. Necrophilia is gross.
Yes,
Sorry.
You're right.
So, what's the worst part of necrophilia?
What?
The awkward silence.
I feel like these are very niche dad jokes. Like, these are very specific.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
There's dad jokes for everything.
You're right. There's dad jokes for every occasion.
The internet does not disappoint. So, digging up stuff is hard, I guess. Necrophilia is not for everybody.
Oh my God. What does it do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life?
Yes, guys, do what you love. Even if it's a corpse.
Gross.
So I'm going to go first because, I'm bossy and I just like to do that.
But also, heads up, guys, and we should have said this earlier, super gross episode ahead.
Yeah, I'll probably record a disclaimer to tack on the beginning.
Definitely.
This one is brutal.
It is. Very uncomfortable.
We do go into some detail about necrophilia and murders. Mm-hmm. And there is talk of rape and dismemberment. So just heads up, if that's not your cup of tea, turn us off now.
For sure.
It's the whole episode, guys. This whole thing is just bad.
Yeah, there's even just writing these and doing the research, we had to take frequent breaks because it was just overwhelmingly awful.
I'm probably going to sanitize my entire body.
Oh, yes.
When I go
we
home.
just need to get like a Lysol bath going.
Yeah. I just feel gross.
Oh, my
and
God.
Dirty. So when I think of necrophiliacs, the one that always springs to my mind first is Ted Bundy.
Well, yeah.
So I was real conflicted about choosing him for this episode because I hate him.
Yeah, for sure.
He was a garbage person, and he's so glorified, and he should not be. But then I thought, wait a minute. What if instead of focusing on the things that people glamorize, what if we highlight that side of him that never gets talked about, the fact that he was a corpse fucker?
Right. Oh, Jesus.
So
I'm not going to make it through this episode.
You're not.
I'm not.
You're not. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a biography of Ted Bundy himself, because his childhood background and things are pertinent to how he became a necrophiliac.
Right.
And I will touch on his crimes, but I'm not going to go in depth with his victims and all of that part, because I feel like that part has just been way overdone.
Absolutely done to death.
So don't get mad at me if you don't hear about all that, but there are tons of great podcasts out there who have done those dives.
Seriously.
And we wanted to just be a little bit different.
We want to be us.
Yes, we're authentically weird. So Theodore Robert Bundy was arguably the most famous American serial killer ever. He was probably also one of the most successful killers ever.
Also true.
He was also a shit stain.
Yes.
He is guilty of kidnapping, murdering, raping, and dismembering at least 30 women and little girls. A lot of people, when they talk about Bundy, they just talk about he murdered women.
Right.
That's not the case. He also murdered a 12-year-old girl. He is a sick fuck.
Fucking trash barge.
So, his killing spree actually even inspired the FBI to look at serial killers in a different manner. And I think his cases were kind of helpful when they developed the behavioral analysis unit and things. So that's kind of, I guess, the silver lining that came out of this. So the thing about being a shit stain is that a lot of times it's a learned behavior. And Ted's childhood honestly gave him a very solid, shitty foundation to work with.
Yeah.
I'm not going into great detail again because pretty much anyone who is a true crime aficionado is going to know this stuff anyway. So again, just glossing over these things. So Ted's mom was Eleanor Cowell. She was a 22-year-old unmarried woman when she gave birth to Ted on November 24th, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. Ted was born at a home for unwed mothers. Oof. And fun fact, Ted actually lived there for the first 2 months of his life because his mom wanted to give him up for adoption.
Right.
But his asshole grandfather refused to allow it, and we'll go more into that in a minute. But back then, basically, a woman getting lucky out of wedlock would get you shunned. Yep. Big time. Think Game of Thrones, Cersei, shaved head in the streets kind of thing. Exactly. Ted's father was never listed on his birth certificate, and there are a few common theories about who sired the boy who hid a demon inside of himself. But the theory that I feel is the most solid is the theory that his grandpa is actually his father. Yep,
I definitely agree with you on that.
You see, his grandpa was known to be extremely violent and abusive and sadistic. He was a bully and a bigot, and he had a predilection for beating his wife, children, and various animals. So when Ted was 2 months old, his grandparents brought him home and then raised him as if he were their own child, because what will the neighbors think?
Yep.
Around the time that Ted turned 3, his mother, basically, from the way I understand it, she was fearful of her father and tired of living under the abuse. So at some family members' urging, she changed their names and moved to Tacoma, Washington from Pennsylvania, where they were living at the time. Just took off.
Right.
And that was kind of traumatic for Ted at the time because, you know, he grew up thinking these people were his parents and that his mom was his sister. Mm-hmm. So at 3, his identity has changed. He gets a new name and he moves across the country. Sort of traumatic. The following year, she ended up marrying a guy named Johnny Culpepper Bundy, who formerly adopted Ted. Pretty sure he regretted that later. Ted did not like his stepdad. He thought his stepdad was dumb, and he resented him for being working class. Ted Bundy was basically an entitled little shit, and he was basically pissy because his stepdad couldn't provide him with all of the expensive clothes and accessories that his teenage self wanted.
Oh my God.
He would fantasize about being adopted by famous people so that he could be properly spoiled.
Properly?
Yes. He eventually did learn about his illegitimacy during his late teens or early 20s. There are a few different versions of that story, too, that float around. Mm-hmm. But that was a pretty formative moment for him, and he did end up harboring a lot of resentment towards his mother for that, which could also feed into his future behavior.
Yep.
So that's why we're talking about that, because throughout I'm going to be dropping these little hint bombs that, you know, it's like ding, ding, ding. Yeah. This feeds into what we're ultimately talking about. Mm-hmm. So, either way, Ted was a bastard, and it fucked with his head. Ted was extremely socially awkward as a child. He was teased mercilessly for having a speech impediment, which is sad.
Yeah.
Nobody deserves that. And guys, teach your kids. You tease somebody, they could grow up to be a serial killer.
Right.
That should be like the new anti-bullying.
Oh my God, yes.
So he unsuccessfully tried out for various sports in high school, and the failure was really hard for him to get over. He did not date in high school and was sort of a loner, and he, much to his own dismay, was not as brilliant as he thought and was just pretty much a solid average student. And that really bothered him. And like people in the media like to portray him as a genius. Mm-hmm. He is not a genius.
Not even a little.
He was average intelligence. He had a lot of luck on his side. Mm-hmm. Basically, he was just a bumbling shit stain idiot.
And given the time frame they're in, he just got super
lucky. Yep. So this is where we're going to start getting gross, guys. Ted was a very busy dude in the 70s. During a 4-year period, he would go on to kidnap, rape, and brutally murder over 30 women. Mm-hmm. His whole shtick was that he would fake being injured or being super feeble, and then when these poor girls were least expecting it, he would Hulk out and overpower them, usually by knocking them unconscious. And then at that point, he would take them to secluded locations where he would assault them, murder them, and then continue assaulting their corpses until they were too putrefied. We will never know exactly the extent of his murderous rampage because Ted was a power and control killer, and him being the only person who knew where his victims were gave him an ultimate feeling of control.
Yeah.
Ugh. He took immense pleasure in dominating his victims, and not only did he thoroughly enjoy torturing them, he found these interactions to be sexually arousing. Like BDSM times 20 is Ted Bundy, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. With emphasis on the M.
Yuck. Sorry, I'm just So he definitely found these interactions to be sexually arousing. And like I said before, he honestly believed that murdering these women and having possession of them was his ultimate, like, the ultimate thing he could do. Like, that was his, like, unicorn.
Gross.
And so in addition to being a shit-stain serial killer, he also was a corpse fucker, as we said.
Of course he was.
So I want to talk about necrophilia for a minute, because, I mean, I think people have a general knowledge of, like, what it is, but I didn't know that there are multiple different types of necrophilia, and I thought that was interesting. So
yeah.
I'm going to tell you about it.
For sure.
So according to the DSM, necrophilia is considered an other specified paraphilic disorder involving reoccurrent and intense sexual interest in corpses. To prepare this episode, I read a lot about necrophilia and how they are classified. I am definitely a changed person now. I will be starting a GoFundMe for all of the therapy that I now require.
Right?
Fun fact, there are 10 classes of necrophile, and now I'm going to list them for you because useless knowledge is my favorite knowledge.
Same.
You're welcome. So class 1 are role players. They don't want to have sex with dead people, but they do like it when someone who is alive pretends to be dead. So they're just kind of moderately creepy, like no big deal. Class 2 is a romantic necrophile. These are bereaved people who would mummify a part of a body of their recently departed loved ones to keep it with them in order to receive psychosexual stimulation. These people would not be interested in a stranger's dead body, only someone that they love.
Right.
So, okay, a little weird, whatever.
Yeah, grief is an interesting beast.
Class 3, necrophilic fantasizers. These people fantasize about cracking open a cold one. They might masturbate in the... Come on, you had to know I was going to go there.
Oh, I didn't realize it was right there.
Yeah, it's there. Okay, guys, so...
Oh, God.
Okay, so these people might masturbate in the presence of a dead body, and they may frequent funeral homes or cemeteries. For tactile necrophiles, they are interested in touching dead bodies. They might stroke or manipulate the erotic parts of a dead person in order to have an orgasm.
No.
It's gonna get worse.
I know. My stomach is clenched.
Before it gets better. Class 5 is fetishistic necrophiles. These assholes cut up body parts of any old dead body they can find so they can keep it as a disgusting sex toy.
Hell no.
That reminds me of like Ed Gein.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
So then we have necromutilomaniacs. Say that 5 times fast. These people are interested in dead bodies as more than just friends.
Gross.
These cadaver Casanovas take their pleasure from mutilating dead bodies.
Oh, that's delightful.
Class 7, opportunistic necrophiles. This is where actual sexual activity with the dead starts on the scale. So these necrophiles would be cool banging the living, but if the opportunity presented itself, they would not hesitate to bang anybody. But you see what I did there? Get it? Anybody?
Okay, see.
Anybody? All right, so a good example of this class of necrophile would be mortuary attendants.
Right.
Class 8 is a regular necrophile who knew there was such a thing. These are your classic necrophiles. They don't like having sex with living people. They can do it, but it just doesn't do it for them like a corpse does.
Right.
Class 9 is a homicidal necrophile. These are obviously the most dangerous kind of necrophiles because they would be content to kill you just so they could fuck you. They can manage to have sex with living people, but where is the fun in that?
Oh my God.
And class 10. These are the exclusive necrophiles. Sex is only possible for them with a dead person. These people completely reject living partners. It seems like they might be the ultimate introverts.
Oh, see, and that just puts it into like another light where we're both like, no, I don't want to deal with people today. Like other humans. You know, hell is other people. Like, they take it a step beyond.
Yeah, that's too far, guys.
Way too far.
Back it up. So this brings us back to dear old Ted. During Ted's junior year of college, he was involved with a woman named Diane Edwards. Like anyone's first relationship, it left a lasting impact on Ted, but Ted's brain took that impact and twisted it all to fuck.
Oh, Jesus.
Multiple criminologists who have studied Bundy believe that she actually influenced the type of woman that he preferred to victimize. She was a beautiful girl from an affluent family.
Of course.
And Ted always felt like he was kind of out of her league. But we all know that this asshat desperately wanted to be in her league. Anne Rule, who is the definitive Bundy biographer and who was also friends with him, believed that Diane was the first person that Ted ever had sex with, and that Ted was way more into her than she was into him. So after junior year, Diane summered at home in California and kind of began to believe that Ted was a loser. He had dropped out of school at this point. He didn't have any drive and career goals that she fancied in a partner. So she decided to break it off with him. And he kind of idolized his relationship with Diane so much that he could not handle the fact that his fantasy of perfection fell apart. So he decided to basically morph himself into the man that Diane wanted.
Right.
He re-enrolled in college. He volunteered for the campaign of a Republican governor. And he also started dating this girl named Elizabeth around this time. And she is the chick that has been in the media a lot lately because she's re-releasing her tell-all novel about living with him and loving him. And I am really sad that I can't wait to read that.
I know. Your whole setup was just upsetting. I have a hard time thinking about them.
Ugh, yeah. I feel bad for her. And
her daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read an interview about her recently, like 2 days ago. And she was talking about how it was very difficult for her when it came out the truth.
Yeah.
Because she's like, here was this person that I knew to be loving and caring and compassionate and who helped me raise my child. But then people are telling me that he also was this sick monster.
Yeah.
And so she was like, it took me a really long time to integrate the two.
You know, I was reading a statement from Richard Ramirez's neighbor that basically said the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't imagine. And like the BTK killer, his daughter wrote a book, and it's really super interesting because that's very in-depth, and it talks about, like, she actively describes her childhood growing up with him and how good of a father he was.
Wow.
And then she very in detail describes, like, when the FBI showed up on her doorstep.
Oh.
And, like, yeah, I have goosebumps just thinking about that.
Yeah, I couldn't, I just...
So, that would be interesting, too, like, to look at as someone in psychology. Like, how
does that affect
families and stuff?
Yeah.
So, so he's way more into her than she is of him. He idolized that relationship and was just pissed that it fell apart. So he decides at this point he's going to pull a long con.
Of course.
He is super pissed that she crushed his soul. So what he does is he re-enrolls in college. He graduates with a degree in psychology. Then he, enrolls in grad school to become a lawyer. He's dating this other woman, doing all these great things, pulled his shit together, and kind of deliberately reconnected with Diane. Like, he sort of stalked her and then made it happen. And then he is just working on showing her how desirable he is now. And he wooed her hard. They rekindled this romance, and they even got engaged. So things are going swimmingly, and all of a sudden, Ted just disappears.
Yep.
He ghosts her. So she is frantic, like, I'm planning my wedding and I can't get a hold of my fiance and what the hell. And like a month into this, he finally answers the phone and basically is like, who are you? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh my God.
And basically just acts like he has no fucking clue who she is. Which is like a whole new level of psycho.
It is.
So I know that was kind of a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but it was important to talk about Diane because she was literally everything he looked for in his victims.
For sure.
The same year that he ended their relationship the last time would be the same year that he started hunting women.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just too much of a parallel to be a coincidence in my mind.
Yeah.
It is believed that Ted practiced necrophilia to achieve sexual and emotional intimacy, that he kind of had difficulty connecting with real people, like alive people. Perhaps in some ways, his rituals of killing, he was kind of creating that loving feeling he had with Diane. Mm-hmm. He preferred to victimize women who looked like Diane. They were all young and attractive, and most of them had dark hair parted down the middle, just like she did. Mm-hmm. So Ted would abduct these beautiful women and little girls. There was 2 little girls. He would then spend a lot of time with them while they were unconscious and also after they died. He talked about in a lot of his interviews, when he finally did talk about it, he believed that these women had the potential to be anyone that he wanted them to be, and that they literally were perfect partners because, you know, if you're unconscious or dead, you can't abandon Ted.
Right.
That should be like a slogan.
Yeah, that's a t-shirt.
It's a t-shirt. We should put that on our list for future memorabilia. Ted enjoyed hanging out with his unconscious victims and also continued hanging out with them when they were dead. And he did that in similar manners that he would hang out with Diane. He and Diane spent a lot of time driving around, and Ted enjoyed driving around with his unaware victims and their bodies.
That's upsetting.
It's very gross.
So upsetting.
Like, could you, okay, like now I'm going to be driving down the highway and thinking, like, who's got dead people with them?
Right.
Like, because you never know.
How would you know?
So he would then take them out in somewhere in the Washington wilderness, and he would sexually assault them, and then he would murder them, and then he would continue sexually assaulting their remains until they were too putrefied for him to continue.
No.
He even severed many of his victims' heads, presumably so he could continue violating them from the comfort and convenience of his own home.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yep. He was also a big fan of positioning their bodies in disturbing poses, but honestly, I feel like any way that you're posing your dead girlfriend is going to be disturbing.
I would assume.
Especially when she doesn't have her head anymore. Like, that's just...
Ugh.
So Ted also enjoyed using his victims as basically dress-up dolls. He would reapply their makeup and repaint their nails when there was nail growth.
Oh my God.
He would also take elaborate Polaroids of his victims, and then when investigators would ask him why he did these things, he said, when you work hard to do something right, you don't want to forget it.
Oh my God.
And that is where I leave Ted Bundy for the rest of my days. Because he was a sick motherfucker.
He was so detailed.
Oh. And the fact that he, like this jerk, he would not divulge. There was a case that's suspected of being his first crime ever when he was like 13 or 14 years old. This little girl in his neighborhood came up missing, and they've never found her. And he has in the past hinted like that he was involved, but he would never come right out and admit it. And her parents, before he got executed, wrote him a letter. And they were like, please just tell us where she is. And he refused. And then when someone asked him during the interviews, he said that his first kill was too special and that he's keeping that for himself.
Jesus. Oh, poor family.
Yeah, and then, you know, they were like, well, you've confessed to these 30 women, you know, are there others? And he's indicated that if you added a digit to 30, that would be the correct number, but he wouldn't specify.
Oh my God. Oh, I hate him so fucking much.
I know, he is
so fucking much.
Literally the worst, so.
I always tell, like, when we did that post about favorite and least favorite, yes. He continues to be my least favorite. Jesus.
He is the worst.
He's gross. All right, so, since Casey did a, very well-known necrophiliac, I decided to do one who isn't as well known, but was one of the first cases in modern memory involving a woman. And the most terrifying part of this one, she is still alive, free as a bird, and no one knows exactly where she is.
Oh God, what if it's my mom?
All right, so this will be Karen Myers / Karen Greenlee. So Karen Myers was born in 1956. Her actual date of birth, statistics, location, everything has been basically wiped out. I even pulled census data from where she was living when she committed her crimes, but to no avail. So unfortunately, I don't have much information on her background and childhood. There was next to no information on her childhood or family that I could find. But you know me and my obsessive super sleuthing tendencies. Finding this shit, even a little bit that I have, took several hours of deep dives. I had to pull voter records, census info, obituaries, deeds, etc.
Wow.
Just to get a little information on his family.
Man, you're like the chick in the cat killer documentary.
Right? That's what, the nurses at work, they always call me baby girl, because Criminal Minds, they know I will find something if I need to. Yeah. It was funny. So I'm sure they did that on purpose. I would change everybody's names, even the cats.
Gave her a new identity, basically.
Yes, yeah. If one of my kids or siblings did something like what she's done. So here's what I was able to glean from my research on the Myers family. Alvin and Audrey Myers were married May 21st, 1950. In quick succession, they had 3 children, Kurt, Donald, and Karen. Alvin was a San Francisco utility worker for about 35 years. He worked for Board of Water and Light in San Francisco. And after he retired, then he and his wife moved to Colfax, California. Once there, he worked as a firefighter, which to me, it sounded like volunteer firefighting. And he also volunteered as a Little League coach with the City Parks and Rec Department, which I thought was sweet. He died in 1985, 6 years after Karen's trial. Her brothers, Kurt and Donald, basically disowned their sister and continued on with their lives. They are both happily married and have had a handful of kids each. Their mother, Audrey, is still living. She sold off the family home in the early 2000s, and I'm not entirely sure where she is now. She is an amateur genealogist, but I was unable to find any other internet presence for her.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you blame her?
I know, right? But she has her profile picture on Find My Grave is adorable and super wholesome, and I'm like, oh, she looks like such a nice lady. Mm-hmm. It's a shame that her daughter is a monster. So on to Karen. By her own accounts, she was a weird fucking kid. She was obsessed with death from a really young age, and those seemingly harmless behaviors like holding funerals for her pets and having a little pet cemetery in the backyard for them. Yeah. Belied something incredibly dark and gruesome. Her fixation started to manifest a bit differently as she got older. So in that small town she grew up in, there was a funeral home located next to a fireman's barbecue that her family used to eat at fairly regularly. It was almost like a food truck kind of deal. Like, it was just, that's how the firefighters raise money. If you had to use the bathroom while you were there, you had to use the facilities inside the funeral home that was next door. She'd come up with any excuse she could just to go into the funeral home for a look-see. Once inside, she'd take side trips and wander around in pursuit of corpses. As Karen grew up, that fixation became infatuation. As a young adult, she followed through on her urges and received education in mortuary sciences.
Gross.
And at some point within this time frame, she married Clarence Greenlee, and they moved to Sacramento. They had a really messy divorce from what I could see. It wasn't real pleasant. Anyway, at 22, she began working as an apprentice embalmer at Memorial Lawn Mortuary in Sacramento. By all accounts, she did well there, with her position lasting about 4 months. She was quite happy there and enjoyed embalming bodies too much. Karen began to feel aroused at the scent of death and the sight of blood. And in her own words, quote, "There are death odors and there are death odors. Now you get your body that's been floating in the bay for 2 weeks or a burn victim. That doesn't attract me much, but a freshly embalmed corpse is something else."
Ew.
There's also this attraction to blood. When you're on top of a body, it tends to purge blood out of its mouth while you're making passionate love. You'd have to be there, I guess.
Oh, God.
So clearly Karen was having a good old time working in the mortuary and satisfying her extremely unnatural urges. Now, her case was atypical because of her gender. Most necrophiliacs are male, like 90% of them.
That's crazy.
Right.
Guys are weird.
Well, you got to think of the mechanics of it.
Right.
Yeah. A female necrophiliac would beg the question of how. Like,
right.
How would that occur? Certain body parts just don't function after death, and penetration would be impossible. Karen would usually stimulate herself by rubbing against the corpse.
So she's just dry humping.
Yeah, she's like a corpse frotteur.
Huh.
She said the condition of the body, scent, temperature, along with the actual environment of the morgue, added to her level of pleasure.
Ew.
After she completed the act, she would sometimes attend the funerals of the people whose bodies she violated.
Well, at least she said goodbye.
I know, right?
That's like the necrophiliac equivalent of buying them breakfast.
She's a lady.
She's like making them pancakes, basically.
Oh my God. So get this. She would pose as a friend or classmate of the deceased and pretend to mourn with the families and friends. Some of these families would take her presence into account and express gratitude for her being there.
How did these funeral home people not realize,
that's
pretending?
What I'm saying, and share their grief. So she then had to explain who she was to the deceased, which led to her telling a huge lie about knowing the deceased from school or being their girlfriend. Fucking crazy.
I mean, though, I guess she kind of is their girlfriend.
She is. That's why that was so upsetting to me. So, December 17th, 1979, Karen was fulfilling her work duties and driving the hearse in the funeral procession of John L. Mercure, a 33-year-old man originally from Michigan. As she pulled into the cemetery and the family members came into view, Karen suddenly hit a hard U-turn and drove off in the 75 Cadillac hearse. Instead of taking the body to the cemetery so he could be properly laid to rest, she decided to spend some time with him.
Oh, no.
She and Mr. Mercure's body were missing for 2 days in California. They were found near Allegheny, California after a wide search. Karen surrendered without issue. And actually, they found she had attempted to overdose on about 20 Tylenol with codeine and was unconscious in the vehicle. She was taken to the hospital, had her stomach pumped, and John Mercure's body was taken back to the funeral home. When they opened the casket to do any necessary repairs, on top of Mr. Mercure's body was a 4.5-page long letter that detailed her activities with between 20 and 40 dead men.
Wow.
She goes on to describe her desires almost like an addiction. Why do I do it? Why? Fear of love, relationships. No romance ever hurt like this. It's the pits. I'm a morgue rat. This is my rat hole. Perhaps my grave. That letter was the main evidence in her criminal trial. Now...
So wait, necrophilia is illegal?
Getting there.
Or is it like kidnapping a body?
It's nothing on the California books. Doesn't exist. So this is what I was getting into. This is what's crazy. Necrophilia was not even on the books. Like, period. Was not in California. There was no actual law against it. So she was charged with illegally driving a hearse. Like, driving a hearse under false pretenses, basically. And interfering with a burial. Right.
Interfering with a burial is illegal.
But banging a
bang
corpse.
Those corpses, guys.
Kidnapping and banging a corpse.
Listen, guys. She did not ethically source this man. But otherwise, I don't care what she did. Like,
see, I do. My feelings were hurt behind this one. So
I mean, if she had ethically sourced him, who cares if she wants to spend 2 days in the California desert with a dead guy?
So gross.
Romantic vacation.
Oh, okay.
Get it? Vacation.
I heard you and I wanted to ignore it. So, to get the court info, I had to go and do another deep dive because a ton of the case information was scrubbed.
We are going to expand the GoFundMe to include your mental health care as well.
I need it. So it looks like some of the other mortuary employees were called to the stand to testify. Richard Kapuczynski was an embalmer who worked really closely with Karen and said the mortuary staff had no reason to suspect anything odd from her. He described Karen as a quiet worker and very good at embalming.
Oh, I bet she was.
She knows his corpses inside and out. The defense team asked Karen's father, Alvin Myers, to testify as well. And this hurt my heart a little bit. He did get very teary on the stand, but he spoke about how Karen had some severe trauma as a child due to molestation at 8, and then she was raped by a teacher at 14.
Oh, poor girl.
Yeah, and that just broke my heart. So yeah, back to the criminal trial. She was pled guilty to those two basically insignificant charges, was sentenced to 11 days in jail and a $255 fine. Also, 2 years of probation with mandatory therapy, which they damn well better.
Homegirl needed it.
Right. So this very obviously wasn't enough because what the fuck? She stole a hearse and absconded with, then desecrated a man's remains for 2 days, right?
Man, we should make a movie about her.
Yeah. Anyway, John Mercury's mother filed a civil suit against Karen and Memorial Lawn Mortuary for a little over $1 million. Marian Gonzalez, who was from Royal Oak here in Michigan, testified that the desecration of her son's remains caused her intense emotional distress, accompanied by some absolutely awful nightmares in which she sees empty caskets and hears her son's voice.
Oh my God, that poor woman.
It broke my heart reading that.
I can't even imagine.
But then Karen's defense team, who I have a lot of anger towards, basically dragged this poor woman's name through the mud. They asked questions about Mrs. Gonzalez's marital history. She was a widow, had been married 4 times since she was 18. They basically called her everything but a child of God through the course of this.
Because that matters when her son's body was kidnapped.
Exactly.
And violated.
She had a history of some mental health difficulties. The defense team called an expert to the stand, Dr. Captain Thompson of Yolo County Mental Health, who described Mrs. Gonzalez as a, quote, diabetic with a lengthy history of alcoholism and depression.
Wow.
On the stand, he stated, I don't see the theft of the body as having a major impact on her current state. The theft became a convenient scapegoat for focusing on, after her son's death, a lightning rod for her anger. He continued, "I don't think she would be significantly different today if it hadn't happened."
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. So this whole trial is trash. I'm pretty pissed about how this was handled and everything Mrs. Gonzalez had to go through. So first she finds out her son's body was stolen by a mortuary worker while they are standing at the gravesite waiting, right? Then to find out what that worker was doing to her son's body. Then the person responsible basically gets a slap on the wrist because there's no actual statute on the books for this kind of bullshit. Like, really. My heart breaks for her, that poor woman. So after the 18-day trial and 7 hours of deliberation, mind you, this is the civil suit trial. Criminal has already happened and she got nothing out of it. The jury voted 9-3 to award $142,500 to Mrs. Gonzalez. So that's $125,000 for compensatory damages and $17,005 in punitive. So that money was placed in a trust fund for Mrs. Gonzalez with some earmarked for therapy to help her work through this situation.
That's good.
Yeah. So when the judgment announcement was made, Karen Greenlee, of course, showed no reaction at all in any way, shape, or form. Karen served her little penance for this indescribably disturbing act and left California. It was clear that she regretted nothing. She did an interview in 1987, which went into disturbingly specific detail about her crimes, as well as her mental state. The whole thing is super long, but you can look it up if so inclined. It's pretty much everywhere. If you Google her name, it'll come up.
Yeah.
It's called The Unrepentant Necrophile by Jim Morton. It's honestly pretty horrific, so I'm just going to give you guys a piece of this dumpster fire. When asked where she was at the time of the trial, quote, "No, I was working at a funeral home in another city and going to school at the same time. It's weird, but the day I got a telegram about the trial telling me to get in touch with my attorney, I went into the funeral home and was fired for things I had done at that funeral home. Somebody, I guess, got wise of me, is what she said. I know I wasn't seen, but I think someone just figured it out. Of course, they didn't know about Sacramento yet. They found out later. The same day, within 5 hours of each other, two totally different things caught up with me.
Whoa.
I worked in that funeral home for almost a year. That's where I did a lot of my extracurricular activities. I had keys, so I'd slip back in after hours and spend all night down there. A guy lived at the funeral home in an apartment downstairs. He drank, so he usually passed out. He had a .357 Magnum under his pillow."
Gross.
That makes me wonder how she knew that.
That's fucking creepy.
Yeah.
Maybe she violated him too.
Right. She had keys.
And he was passed out, so...
She even divulged that she knew John Mercure's body had been exhumed after the trial. This is incredibly fucked and my heart hurts. That happened. This is her giving her little... I can't. Quote, "That happened at the time I was breaking into funeral homes. There was a side room, one of those arrangement areas where they always have their case folders out. I read there was an exhumation order for John Mercure. His mother wanted the body exhumed, said she wouldn't bury her cat there. On the day he was supposed to be exhumed, I snuck out into a field across from where he was buried. I sat out in the field and watched them dig up the body and give him to this other mortician. They shipped him back to Michigan."
What a sick bitch.
This is so damn violating. Like, I am legit angry about this. She couldn't just go away and let that man rest in peace. So in the interview, she talks about how necrophilia is really common among funeral homes, that they just never reported.
I actually read that. Like, it's not super common overall in the population,
No.
but it's disproportionately common in the funeral industry.
Right. And I hate how she words this, just because she makes it sound like this just happens. Like, this is completely normal.
Like, it's just fine.
Yeah.
No big deal.
She's so, like, blasé about the whole thing. So while she was breaking into funeral homes to get her rocks off, she was almost caught a handful of times. She mentioned specific instances where she caught a coworker desecrating a body, and it just upset me really, really badly. All that therapy Karen was sentenced to after getting caught just made her more accepting of herself. She was assigned a social worker that she actually seemed to like, and from her account seems like totally non-judgmental. Quote, "The more I talk to these people, the more I realize necrophilia makes sense for me. The reason I was having a problem with it was because I couldn't accept myself. I was still trying to live my life by other people's standards. To accept it was peace. These people who were always trying to change me only helped me get myself more in touch with my feelings. I used to go from the therapist's office to the funeral home. It didn't work, folks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I might agree.
Yeah, I what she's saying.
With what she's saying.
Yeah.
If we were talking about, like, I am a trans person and I've accepted myself and
that makes sense in those cases.
That makes sense. Or,
something
normal. Normal, but like, okay.
This is not
No.
This is not something normal. This is not something that makes sense biologically. Like, I can't. So, like, just knowing she's out here, like, straight up living her life,
Probably still banging dead people.
Correct. Just breaking into morgues and crypts to desecrate human remains as if that's something normal, No one really seems to know where she is now. She changed her name and basically fell off the face of the earth. She reportedly regretted the interview with Jim Morton and has refused to do any others until later. But I did find out she appeared on an unaired episode of Sally Jesse Raphael in the mid-90s. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd bet her money was running low.
Probably.
Because her degree was in mortuary sciences, and who was going to hire her at this point? Sally Jesse refused to air the episode because of how obvious it was that Karen Greenlee regretted absolutely nothing.
Wow.
It's straight up nightmare fuel. I hate this so much.
I wish that we could find the footage.
I want to find it so badly. Because I have so many emotions about this case. Like, yeah. I'm struggling with this one, and I really wish I had picked something that happened further in the past so it wouldn't bother me this bad. Like, this is so upsetting because this broad is just out here still alive and chilling, and like, this is completely normal. And my heart hurts because I'm thinking about Mrs. Gonzalez and knowing how they treated her in court and that she got that little 100,000. Like, what is that? I can't. This shit is upsetting.
It is. That's.
This was a really hard one. This is up there with like Delphi for me. Where
it was super interesting, but super hard to stomach.
Yeah. I struggle with, I have a weird relationship with death anyway, so this was hard for me. So I think we need a palate cleanser.
Yes. Before that though, I have to give our listeners a Mr. Overlook Hottie update. Guys.
He's such a babe.
He is a stone fox. He has this sweater on today that just looks so cozy.
It does. It looks super comfy.
Oh, look. He might know I'm talking about him. He's like molesting.
He's playing with the beard again. See, that's how we know that's his tail.
Mm-hmm. So, buddy, if you're a listener, again, bring it in for a hug.
Right. You just want to hang out.
We love you.
Come chill with us.
We love you. Mm-hmm. Come be a guest on our show.
For sure.
All right, so give me some palate cleansing.
Okay, palate cleansing. Weird news is my favorite.
I love it.
Weird news that involves animals is my super favorite.
I love it.
A man in Brisbane, Australia, who was in a boat, saved a dog from being drowned by a kangaroo.
Say what?
Yeah.
Kangaroos can swim?
See? Okay, that's what I said. I did not know that they could swim.
Okay, so I recently shared like a post about this person who rescues baby kangaroos in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
And it like was very informative, and between that though and this, I realized I literally just know nothing about kangaroos.
I always like the images of them like where they're like super buff.
Right, where they look like a fucking boxer.
Yes, It tickles me. And I'm like, that kangaroo would come in your house, run your shit.
Like that one video where the kangaroo's boxing himself in the window?
Yes.
And he's like
Oh my God. So little bitty like terrier, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He's teeny tiny guy.
That dude is lucky that the kangaroo didn't whoop his ass.
Right.
He's like in this tiny little metal boat,
Like
a
yeah.
rowboat type thing with like a trolley motor.
So the dog was, I guess the kangaroo and the dog were on land at some point. The dog starts barking at the kangaroo, chase the kangaroo into the Pine River.
That's a bad choice.
I think so. And then now that the kangaroo realizes that this tiny thing that made a whole lot of noise is in the water, he starts trying to drown it. Like straight up is trying to dunk this dog into the water and drown it.
It's a homicidal kangaroo.
So the guy, his name is John Olani. He saw this from his boat and just leapt into action to save this little dog. He's talking to 7 News and says, the kangaroo turned around and started drowning the dog. It went under a good 4 or 5 times. I just put the boat back in the water and went and got the dog. If I wasn't there, that dog was dead. The kangaroo, once Mr. Lonnie went out in his boat, grabbed the dog, and kind of went back to shore with the dog, the kangaroo just kind of sat in the water for a minute and then decided he was going to swim back to shore and fled the scene.
Well, I mean...
He attempted murder.
He said, fuck the police. He was out.
So shout out to John Alani for saving a tiny terrier from being a murder victim.
We gotta share that video.
I know. I'm definitely going to share a link to this video because it is. You guys got to see this. It's stunning.
It's amazing.
It is. But yeah, that kangaroo had a vendetta. He was just angry. He's like, nah, screw this. This little dog got to go.
I love it.
So, this week's Friend of the Week.
Friend of the Week.
Is our much, much, much beloved, wonderful friend, Marianne.
Marianne.
So, our buddy Marianne Bohr is... 1, super active on the page.
She is super active, and she has, like, the best sense of humor.
Mm-hmm. 2, she was one of our first listeners.
Yes.
And 3, she was a Jeopardy contestant this past year.
Hell yeah, she was.
Okay? Like, she's a hero. I met Marianne in a comic book group that I am part of that is run by my internet twin, Erica Hardison, who is also the creator of Fabulous Mag and is probably my favorite person in the world. Like, at least top 3. You don't count. You are my soul sister. You're like me. You're me. So, like, we got connected in that group, and I have got to say, Marianne has got one of the best senses of humor.
Oh, yeah.
She is so quick-witted and so fun.
Like, she's commented back at me a few times, and I really enjoy every time we interact.
Yes, she's hilarious.
Like, when I first realized who she was, because I was like, that name sounds familiar, because I'm a Jeopardy nerd. And then I, like, clicked on her name, because I'm a stalker, guys. And I saw the Jeopardy picture, and I was like, oh, my God.
Right.
It was an exciting moment for me.
But yes, I really want to make sure we give her moment in the fun because she's just really, really good people.
Thank you so much for loving us.
Yes, and always being super supportive of me, my nonsense, and also the show.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Marianne.
We do. You're good people. So yes, that was our fucking awful dive into necrophilia.
Of course, one of our longest episodes ever would be the grossest.
Of course it is, because this is just how we operate.
Yeah.
Jesus. But we will be back next week with
something not
this heavy
gross.
And gross and terrible.
But in the meantime, you can check us out on Facebook at Sinister, Strange, and Suspicious Podcast.
On Instagram, SSS Podcast 13. You can email us at ssspodcast13@gmail.com and also visit our site, which is ssspodcast.net.
Thanks for hanging out with us this week, guys.
Yeah. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate all the new friends and followers that we've gotten lately.
Keep sharing us.
Yes, and we promise we will keep sharing these ridiculous true crime, serial killer, oddity, very strange history memes that you guys seem to enjoy.
Yes. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.